Hello, can everyone hear me? I just want to check the audio first. Can everyone hear me? All right, great. So good to see everybody here. This is GPAL joining you all from Bethesda, Maryland. So good to see everybody here. Today we're going to be learning SQL. I want to do a quick survey here. So how many people here have some kind of experience with SQL? If you have some kind of experience with SQL, just enter +1 in the chat section. All right. Who here has some experience with SQL? Excellent. If you don't have any experience with SQL, enter +2. Right? If you don't have Okay, so this course is, if you have a basic rudimentary understanding of SQL, or if you're just starting out, it doesn't matter. We're going to be covering the basics of SQL today. That's what we're going to be doing today. So just a quick introduction about myself. First of all, my name is Giri. I go by GPAL. I'm a self-taught programmer, and I started teaching back in March. In March of this year, I ran a 4-week Python course for about 50 folks. That's how I got into teaching of Python, and then I moved on to SQL, and I have a keen interest in learning and teaching programming. So here's the game plan for today, right? The goal is I want everybody here to be able to use SQL confidently to analyze data sets, and the focus of this class is really going to be on the fundamentals of SQL. We're going to be learning how we can retrieve and filter data. That's going to take about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to have an exercise at the end of it where you'll be able to apply what you learn. So that's going to come at the tail end of this session itself. So there are 3 principles that guide these classes for me. First of all, I believe that we learn best by practice. So I'm going to do as little talking as I can, and the focus is going to be on practice itself. Second idea is the 80-20 rule. And what that is essentially 80% of the value of learning SQL comes from learning 20% of the concepts. So this class and all the others I'm running focus on the most critical 20%. And the last principle that's also dear to me when it comes to the design of these courses is peer-to-peer learning matters, and I think it makes learning a lot more fun. And I want to give out a special shout out to all those who have been helping other students in the previous classes, and a special mention to Claudette and Akash for helping students in the prior classes. Thank you so much for being there for other students. Thank you so much. And there are going to be 2 tools that we're going to be using today. The first is our Discord server app, and the second is data.world, which is the place that we're going to be running our SQL queries. So Discord is the place where you can ask any question, and it's also the place where we post all the updates, and it's where you can take a look at the notes from prior classes. So if you haven't signed up, here is the short link to our Discord server app. For those who are new, I want to quickly show you the sections that we have there. So imagine. So let me just show you the main channels that we're going to be using today for this class. So you type in tinyurl.com/let's learn club. And if you go in, this is where I post all the class announcements in the class announcements channel. And there are a few other interesting channels here, but what I want to highlight is the in-class discussion. channel, specifically the programming exercises section. This is where if you have any questions as we go along, you can post it, and I'll be answering it. Others would be able to chip in as well. So if you haven't signed up for a Discord server app, go ahead and do it so that you can join us. The next tool that we're going to be using today is called data.world. Typically, when you run SQL queries, you need to download special programs, and it can be a bit inconvenient. The nice thing about data.world is that it allows you to code on the browser, so you don't need to download anything. And the next benefit of it is that it allows you access to lots of cool data sets, and it's also free. So let's go ahead and perform our first query. So at this point, if you haven't signed up, go to data.world and sign up for an account. All right, and when you're done, just type it out on the message section so that I know that we can move on to the next section. All right, done. Excellent. Great. So anyone having any issues signing up? Excellent. Awesome. So let me show you just briefly how this website works here. If you want to download your own, you can add your own data sets here. We can focus on that later if we have extra time. But what I want to do very quickly is I want to show you how you can search for different data sets here to begin with. So you go to the search bar, and today the data set that we're going to be using to practice is called Bird's Strike. So you just type in BIRD strikes and click here. Right, so this is the data set that we're going to be analyzing today. And when you get here, click Explore. Okay, let me briefly explain what this data set is so that there's some context. So the Federal Aviation Authority, FAA, encourages airlines to report cases in which birds or other forms of wildlife strike the plane. And they have been collecting this data set for many, many years. And this user by the name of Shi decided to collate the data and post it on this website. And today we're going to be practicing our queries based off of this data set. And after you get here, go to New Query, SQL Query. And then you should see this blank page. So far, all's good? Any problems so far? Okay, so whenever you have a data set, the first thing that you want to do is take a quick look at the different columns in the data set. You want to get a feel of the data set. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the main Excel file. So let's go to birdstrikes.xlsx. Let's go there. And let's take a look at the different columns. So we know that this data set is from 2000 to 2011. Okay. It has a record ID, aircraft type, the name of the airport, the number of wildlife struck, the effect that it had on the plane, the damage done, the conditions of precipitation, whether the remains of wildlife were collected. This is funny. Whether the remains were sent to the Smithsonian. the size of the wildlife, whether the pilot was warned of birds or wildlife, the cost, the number of people injured, and so on. So we're trying to get a feel of the data set. Okay, fine, that's great. Now let's go and run our first query. So follow along, and then I'll explain what's going on here. So what we do is, let's just type this out, then I'll explain what we did. Select wildcard operator from bird strikes, right? So this is the most basic SQL command. What's happening here is that I'm telling SQL, go ahead and select all the columns from this table, which is called birds underscore strikes. If the name of your table is something different, it has to be that name. But in this case, the table is called bird underscore strikes. So we're saying pull all the columns and all the rows from this table, right? And let's run the query. And when you run the query, what you find is you get all the rows and all the columns from this table. So this is the first command you need to learn. Select wildcard operator from name of the table. It allows you to get all the data. Now, that's not super helpful, right? Because you're just getting all the data. You need some way of kind of filtering out the results. You want just, let's say you want just specific columns. The way that you go about getting just specific columns is by mentioning the name of the column here. So instead of this wildcard operator, you enter the name of the column itself. So let's say I just want to know the airline, whether it's Delta or American or United. I just want to know the airline operator and the name of the state. Okay, so if that's the case, what I would do is I would say I want to know the name of the airline operator, and the name of that column is, let's take a look at it. It's aircraft airline operator. Great. So I'll type that in. Aircraft underscore airline operator, comma, and let's say I want to know the origin state, right? So I just type in origin underscore state. And if you run that, what you find is that you get results just for those specific columns. So this allows us to kind of customize the output. The first time we ran select with the wildcard operator, we got every column, but right now we're just getting the specific columns that we are interested in. So this is the second main concept that you need to understand. Any questions so far? Otherwise, we can keep moving ahead. Yeah, so one question was, is there a difference between what happens if we have the dot operator, meaning we put bird strikes dot? It doesn't make a difference in this case because there's just one table. SQL understands that when you just say aircraft airline operator, which is the name of the column, it infers that it's from this table. But suppose you have multiple tables with similar column names, identical column names, that's when the dot operator comes in handy, meaning you put the name of the table dot name of the column. Okay, let's move on. Let's keep going on. So far we have learned how to get all the columns, and then we learned how to get specific columns. Suppose you want to filter the results based on a numeric value. Let's say you want to pull all the rows in which the total cost of a bird or wildlife strike was more than $10,000. The way that we would do that is, let's say select from, we keep it the same, and then we use the keyword where, W-H-E-R-E, and then we enter the column that we want to filter the results based on. So in this case, it's, let's take a look, it's cost total, right? I want to know all the results in which the cost total was more than $10,000. I put that in and I run the query. Right. Now we have 548 query results, far less than what we used to. And then if you take a look at the cost total column, which is all the way here, you find that the cost total is greater than $10,000, right? So we are now able to filter out results based on certain numerical conditions. So this is also a very critical concept. You need to be able to understand how you can filter results. So this will come in extremely handy. Now, suppose you don't want to filter results based on a numerical condition, but based on a string value. Suppose you want results in which the origin state was New York. So the way that you do that is you would say where name of the column origin underscore state equal New York. Now the thing that I want to emphasize here is that this string, this text that goes in is case sensitive, right? So you need to make sure that you get the capitalization right. And let's say we run the query. And let's take a look at origin state. You find that now the results are only cases in which the origin state was New York. Now, suppose you want to search based on multiple conditions. I want cases in which the origin state is New York and the cost of total damage was more than $5,000. So if that's the case, what you would do is you would use the keyword and cost underscore total greater than 5,000. So you run the query. Now, let's take a look at origin state. It's all New York. And if you take a look at cost total, it's all greater than 5,000. So the point that I want to make here is that you can add multiple conditions with the AND operator. And with the AND operator, whatever conditions that you specify here, the rows need to match every single condition that you specify with an AND operator. But instead of an AND operator, you could also use a OR operator. Just type in OR. And now, let's say we run the results and the query again. Now what's going to happen is it's going to search each row and ask, is the origin state New York? Great. Yes. If it's yes, let's output the row. If it isn't, is the cost total greater than $5,000? If that condition is met, that's also fine. And then the result's going to be included in the final output. That row is going to be included in the final output. So with an OR operator, just one of the two conditions needs to be true, and you're going to see that row in the output. So that's how you can filter results. So far we have learned how to select columns and then how you can filter rows based on numerical or text-based conditions. Any questions so far? Otherwise, we can keep plugging along. Okay, so let's keep moving along. So far, whenever we got the results, so let's just keep this query, right? Now let's take a look at cost total. Let's take a look at that column specifically. Now what you realize is, let me adjust this 1 second. Okay, so now let's run this query. Let me show you what I mean here. Okay, now when you take a look at cost total with this specific query, what you find is that the results aren't in any order. It's all jumbled up. You have 36,000 and then 79,000 and then 13,000. That's not super helpful. Suppose we want to get the results in an ordered structure. How do we do that? It's very intuitive. You just add the word order by cost and order by the condition, the column that you want to use to order the results by. And in this case, that's cost underscore total. Let's run this and let's see what happens. Okay, so we run this query. Now, if we take a look at cost total, you find that it's in ascending order, meaning it's starting out with the smallest value and then it's moving up to the larger values. It's in ascending order. Suppose you want the results in descending order. How do you do that? Very simple. You just add the keyword DESC, and now if you run the query again, let's see what happens. Now, if you take a look at the cost total, you find that it's in descending order, meaning it's starting out with the largest value and then it's moving down. So you find that the most costly incident was, there are lots of numbers here. It's almost $12 million. Yeah. So with DESC, you can order by the specific condition in a descending order. Yeah, that bird did do some damage. Okay, so far we have been basically filtering results, ordering the results, and so on. That's all great, but sometimes you need to make sense of the data. You want to you want to know the cases in which you want to perhaps sum up the number of birds that have been killed by these incidents, or the number of people who have been injured by these incidents. Just getting outputs of rows, filtering conditions doesn't help. We need to use certain keywords like sum, average, count, and so on. So I'm going to show you how that works right now. So suppose you're interested to know the cases. You want to know the total number of wildlife that had been struck by these planes based on the data set. The way that you would do that is you would say select sum and then the name of the column that you want to sum up, right? Let's say you want to sum up wildlife number struck. Let's use actual from bird strikes. And if you run the query, you find that the total number of birds or wildlife that have been struck by these planes is almost 68,000. So what's happening here is that when you're saying select sum column, you're saying go ahead and add up all the numbers in this wildlife number struck actual column and output that result. So that's what you can do with sum. Suppose instead you want to know the average damage done by these strikes. You want to get the average cost total. The way that you do that is instead of sum, you would say average AVG, and let's say I want to know what's the average cost of these strikes. And the name of that column is cost total. So key in cost underscore total. Let's run that query now. And you find that the average damage done is about $5,500. So that's another command that comes in handy. Another useful command is count. Let's say, let me show you the results again. Suppose you want to know the cases in which these strikes cause some kind of damage. So let's take a look at the effect indicated. Okay, let's say you want to know the cases in which the bird or wildlife strike caused some kind of an engine shutdown, right? We want to get a count of that. So what we would do then is we would say select count from bird strikes where the name of the column, let's say, which in this case it's effect impact to flight, effect impact to flight equal engine shut down, right? Run the query. So you find that in 90 cases, the engine got shut down because of a bird strike or some kind of a wildlife strike. So with this command, what you're saying is count all the rows in which the effect impact to flight column has this specific result. So that's what we're doing there. And just two more commands to sum this up. There's also the minimum and maximum command. So suppose you want to know the maximum number of people who have been injured by these kinds of bird or wildlife strikes. So let's do that. Let's say we want to know that. We say select max. And the specific column is the number of people injured. So we would say select max number of people injured from bird strikes. Run that. We find that in the worst case, 6 people were injured by some kind of a bird or wildlife strike. And instead of max, you can also use min. If you run min here, it should show you 0. So the min is saying, okay, let's go to this specific column and let's get the minimum value and let's output that. So think of this whole select section as the display and everything else that follows it as kind of processing. That's an easy way of kind of simplifying all the stuff that we are learning. Great. So another useful keyword is distinct. So let me type out the command and then let me explain how that can come in handy. Suppose you say select distinct aircraft airline. Let's take this up. Let me show you how this can come in handy. Run the query. So if you don't have, so what distinct does is that it takes away all those duplicated lines. So in this case, I said, look, get me all the aircraft airline operator column rows. But with distinct, I'm saying, look, if there's any duplication, take it out. Don't replicate the results again. So if there are multiple United Airlines, I'm saying, look, I just want one instance of that specific field itself. So distinct allows you to take away all the duplicated results. So it's a super helpful command to know. Any questions before we move on to group by, which I think is one of the coolest commands in SQL? Any questions? Otherwise, we can move on to group by. Questions that y'all had was, what are the distinctions between Oracle, MySQL, and so on. So specifically data. So here's the way to think about it. SQL is pretty much standard across the board, but there are certain idiosyncrasies with specific versions of it. So MySQL is going to be slightly different from Oracle, which is going to be different from other proprietary versions of SQL. So specifically on data.world, they have their own version, but it's pretty much the standard. So the standard SQL commands, you can run it here. It's not going to be any different. So it's pretty much standard. Okay, so let's keep plugging along. If you have any questions, keep them coming, and then I'll help answer them while we do the mini quiz later on. All right, so the next thing we're going to learn is group by, which I think is a really neat command. So let's just go back to the default. Select every row, every column from bird strikes. Okay. The query. Now, so far, we have, using sum, average, count, and so on, we have been able to analyze all the rows together. That's helpful, but in some cases, you want to be able to segment your analysis. So imagine you want to lump all the cases in which the pilot was warned of whether there's going to be bird or wildlife strike. And let's take a look at that column. Right? Suppose you want to know, is the average damage done more or less when the pilot has been warned of birds or wildlife? You want to know that. You want to answer these questions. To do that, you need to be able to segment your analysis, meaning you need to be able to lump all the rows in which the column is false and also lump all the rows in which the column is true. And then you want to be able to use commands like average, sum, count, and so on. So the way that you do that is you use the keyword group by, and in this case, we want to know, we want to group by this specific column. Was the pilot warned of birds or wildlife? So we say pilot warned of birds or wildlife. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to say, look, lump all the cases in which it's false together and lump all the rows in which it's true. Okay, that's great. And we want to know specifically whether the average damage done is more or less with each of these cases. So in that case, I would say select AVG cost underscore total. Now let's run this and let's see what happens. Okay, so we get two outputs here, 5,600 from one case and then 5,400 in another case. But this isn't exactly meaningful, right? Because we want to know in which case is the damage done $5,600 and in which case is the damage done $5,400. So what do we do then? We know that by adding the name of a column right next to select, we can get it as an output. Great. So we would just say, look, I want to know this specific column. I want to have it right next to the result. Cut that out. I would say average cost total. Let's run this again. Oops, a small typo. Give me one moment here. There's a typo here. All right, let's put this here. Okay, let's run this query. Now this is excellent. Now we know that when the pilot wasn't warned of birds or wildlife, the average damage was $5,600. But when he or she was warned of birds or wildlife, the average damage done was $5,400, which is less. And this seems to make intuitive sense. But remember that we also know how to use order by. So if if you have lots of rows and you want to have the results in ascending order, you could also put an order by AVG cost total. So this is going to flip the results around and it's going to have the results in ascending order. Now, group by, you could use multiple conditions, multiple columns with group by. Right now, I've just used one, but let me show you how you can use, very quickly, how you can use multiple conditions here. Suppose you want to know whether the conditions of the sky, whether the weather pattern made a difference as well. And the column for that is condition sky. So let's put that in here. Let me explain what's happening here. Conditions. Let me explain what we're doing here. So previously we just segmented it based on this one specific column. Now we're saying, look, I don't just want to segment based on whether the pilot was warned of bird life or not. I also want you to branch out and kind of segment it by the weather condition, right? Let's say we run this. Let's see what happens. Oops. Okay. Give 1 second. There's a typo here. Now, what's happening here? It's now we know that when it comes to condition sky, it can be either overcast, some cloud, or no cloud. Now, what SQL is doing in the background is it's saying, okay, let's take all the columns, let's take all the rows, let's separate them into 2 buckets, whether the pilot was warned of birds or wildlife, or he wasn't. And then let's subdivide it further based on the condition, the weather conditions. And then let's take the average cost. And because we have an order by here, let's order it by ascending order. So that's what's happening here. And what you find is that when the pilot wasn't warned of birds or wildlife and the weather was overcast, that's when the damage done was the highest. And once again, this jibes well with our intuition. So group by, I think, is really, really helpful. For those who are proficient in Excel, this is a little like pivot tables, but I would say that this is way more expressive and far more intuitive than pivot tables. So group by is extremely powerful. So what we're going to be doing next is that we're going to be doing an exercise for 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back and go through that exercise. So here is the link to the exercise. It's tinyurl.com/I know SQL. Right? If you go there, there's like I've got 5 questions there. Go ahead, give it a shot so that all the things that you have learned start, you can start piecing them together. Take 15 minutes. At about 3:25, we'll come back and we'll go through the challenging questions. So here's the link. I'm going to share it both on our YouTube channel and our Discord server. So take 15 minutes, try out the quiz. And if you have any questions, go ahead, pop it on our Discord server app, and I'll be happy to help. Some of the questions can be a little tricky. If you have any questions, go ahead, post it so that we can work on them. Take another 5 to 7 minutes, 7 minutes or so, and then we can get back and go through the questions. All right, the responses are streaming in. So far, I've gotten about 10 responses so far. Take another 5 more minutes, and let's get back in about 5 minutes. Okay, let's take another 3 minutes. Okay, 1 more minute and I'll go through the questions. If you're stuck at any question, not an issue. We can go through it and make sure that everybody gets the concepts. Okay, just take 1 more minute, wrap it up, and then let's get back on the screen so that we can continue with the class, so that we can go through these questions. Okay, everybody, let's get back onto the main screen so that we can go through the questions. If you were stuck at any question, not a big issue. This was kind of a crash course. It's perfectly fine. You can review the material later on. I'll be passing everybody notes from this class with all the key commands so that you can refer back to it later on at the end of the class. So if you're stuck or anything, don't worry. Eventually you'll get it. We'll go through the questions right now and you should be in good shape. So let's open up the main. Let's go to the data set. Great. So the first question was, how many firms in the Forbes 2000 list are headquartered in New York? Let me open up the question here. So the first question is, how many firms in the Forbes 2000 list are headquartered in New York? So the way that you go about approaching that is, if you want to, essentially we want to get a count of all the rows in which the headquarters column is equal to New York. So the way that we would do that is we would say select count. We're saying, you know what, count all the rows from this specific table called Forbes 2000, Forbes Global 2000, where the headquarters column, which is this column, is equal to New York. So we would type in headquarters equal New York, right? And if we run that query right now, you find that the answer is 70. So let's go ahead, let's click that. Now the second question is, how many firms in the list belong to either the airline or the electronics industries? Okay, so essentially it's somewhat similar to the first one, except that now we have an OR condition, right? So let's go back. So right now the column that we need to look at is the industry column. So we would say equal industry equal airline or industry equal electronics. And if you run that query right now, you get 53. The thing that I want to mention here is that some people were kind of stuck because they wrote out the command this way, meaning they just specified the column of interest once, but SQL doesn't process those kinds of lines. You need to specify the condition of interest an additional time if it's another condition. So you need to mention it again, right? And you find that the answer to it is 53. Let's go ahead, let's keep that in. The third question was, which company in the Forbes 2000 list posts the highest profit? So the way to think about this is essentially we want to order the list and have the company that has the highest profit. So we want to order by the profit column and have it in descending order, meaning the largest value at the top. So the way that we do that is we say select. Let's say I just want all the rows, all the columns from Forbes Global, that's the name of the table, order by profits, DESC. So I'm saying, look, give me all the rows and all the columns and order this by the profits in the descending order, meaning I want the highest profit at the very top. And then you find that the answer to this is Apple. Apple has the highest profit. So if you take a look at the profits column, you find that it's decreasing from the top. It's in descending order. So Apple is the answer to this question. So let's put Apple here and let's move on. So the fourth question was, companies from how many unique countries are represented in the database, in the Forbes 2000 database? The keyword here is unique. So when you think about unique, in your mind, you must be thinking of the keyword distinct, because distinct takes out all those duplicated results. So this is how you would approach this question. We want to know the unique countries represented in the data set, right? So we would say select count country. This is going to have duplicated results, so we need to insert the keyword distinct country from table. So what's going to go on here is that it's going to go through each row, count the number of distinct countries, and give us the count at the end of it. To run the query, you find that the answer is 62. So let's key that in. And the fifth question was, which electronics firm in the Forbes 2000 list posts the highest profit? What we need to be very careful is that we want to look at the highest profit, meaning that's going to be ordered by. We need to use that command. But we only want firms in the electronics industry. And we know that we can filter rows with the keyword where, right? So let's put that together. And you find that, so suppose I want to get all the columns from the table where the industry equal electronics. And because I want the electronics firm with the highest profit, I would say order by profits, DESC. Let's run the query. And you find that Han High Precision has the highest profit in the electronics industry. So Han High Precision is the company. So let's put that in. And then we are down to the last question. The last question asks us, Forbes 2000 companies from which industry post the highest average revenue? So essentially, we need to group this by the industry because we want to segment it. We want all the electronics firms together. We want all the transportation companies together. So we need to group by the industry, and then we need to take a look at the average revenue, right? So the way that we would do that is we would say, select. Let's just leave the select part blank for a moment. From the table of interests, group by industry, all the electronics firms together, all the travel firms together. And I want to order this by average revenue, right? DESC. Okay. And what do I want in the output, in the display? I want to know the industry. And I also want to know the average revenue. So revenue is a column of interest. So if I run the query right now, what you find is that the results are segmented, grouped by the industry, and you see the average revenue. And you find that discount stores have the highest average revenue, right? So let's go to the sixth question and key that in. And if we sum it, you find that we got all the questions right. So what's next? So after this, I'm going to be sending you the link to class notes on our Discord server app, specifically the class announcements channel. It's going to contain all the commands that we learned today so that you can use it as a reference. So go ahead, take a look at that later on. I'm going to be uploading that immediately after we finish this live stream. And next week, I'm going to be offering a Git and a GitHub class. So if you are interested to sign up for that class, it's going to have a similar format to this, meaning I would teach and we would do exercises, and then we would have like a mini quiz at the end of it. So this is the link to sign up for that class if you're interested to do that. And finally, if you find this class helpful and if you wish to support me, you can go to this link and send me a small donation. Any help is highly appreciated. Thank you so much, everybody. Look out for the link to the class notes on our Discord server class announcements channel. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.